On just about every men's professional in the bag that you see, they're going to list all their discs at 174 to 180 grams, as close to max weight as they can get. But then when they go throw distance competitions in the desert, they're throwing 150 gram, 160 gram discs in the 60-mile-an-hour tailwinds, and they're going super duper far. You could ask yourself why they don't throw those lighter discs on the course. And in general, the answer is going to be that they sacrifice control for that distance and it's not worth the trade-off. But do you really? And then on the other side of the equation, you have the newer player, the intermediate, the recreational player that doesn't throw anything max weight. They try to keep it high 160s so they can get that extra glide, that extra distance, and they learn how to control it, and then they move up to the heavier discs. But is that the right way to do things? Does any of this make sense? Well, that's what I'm here to solve. I have the luxury of working at the Dynamic Discs warehouse, and I can go pick through all of the discs, so many discs. So I found a max weight 175 Opto Ballista Pro. The lowest Opto Ballista Pro I could find is a 167, and then I also found an Air Ballista Pro, and this one is 158. And I threw these all side by side, and I threw them in an open field with no wind and an open field with wind to see what the differences are. Let's take a look. So for my first experiment, my hypothesis is that lighter discs are less stable. So I went out to a field and I threw all three discs on as close as I could get to the same line, the same angle out of my hand. And I was gonna see how far to the right they finished, because the Ballista Pro is a fairly straight to understable, well, straight to overstable. Depending on how you throw it, it's pretty straight overall. And I guess depending on the weight, maybe. We'll find out. I gave it away there, whatever. I threw the max weight Ballista Pro here on a hyzer. It flipped up, glided to the right, and settled back fairly straight. Then I threw the 167 Ballista Pro on the same angle, and it did turn more. It definitely had more turn than the max weight. It glided over to the right, and it went about 10 or 15 feet farther. And then I threw the Air Ballista Pro, and it didn't fly anything at all like the first two flew. So, first off, does the lighter version of the Ballista Pro fly less stable? Answer is yes. But why didn't the Air Ballista Pro fly less stable? So the Air plastic is a completely different run than the Opto plastic. They have to stop making the Opto Ballista Pros, and then they make the run of Air Ballista Pros. So these have a much higher parting line. They're a little bit domier, so this disc is more stable. But it's not because of its weight. It's because it's a completely different run than these two. So mainly I'm going to focus on the difference between these two discs and really just use this one as almost a control or an extra, a bonus thrown in there sometimes. So lighter discs are less stable. Do they go farther? So on this test, rather than throwing them at the same angle, I was looking to reproduce the same angle. So I would have to throw this the lighter one on a little bit more hyzer to get it to turn and end up on the same angle later in its flight. So I'm gonna see if I can do it. It would look something, a hyzer flip would look like this much hyzer would get to this, like the same angle. That was nose up, whoops. Anyway, get the same angle in its flight to get the same flight path, just a different starting angle. So my first attempt was to get them to flip to flat. And the orange here, the heavier one, I did get a little bit higher than the pink, but I flipped it up almost to flat, just a little bit of hyzer still, and it faded gently into the side of the hill. Then I threw the lighter weight one on a little bit lower, but the fairly similar line. I feel like I threw them with the same shot, the same shape. And then I threw the Air Ballista Pro, and it was way more stable, and it faded out way short. Kind of confusing for the lighter discs to be so short, but the heavier and the 167 were the exact same distance. So, okay, maybe I threw the pink one a little bit lower. We'll try getting a little bit more of an apples to apples comparison there. So I threw them on a hyzer flip next, and I was trying to turn them over the same amount and have them fade back. Or a slightly higher hyzer flip. Once again, they were within 5-10 feet of each other. Okay, so what about if I throw them on a pure hyzer the whole way? This was actually a few days later out at the DC, and they were again within 5 feet of each other. what about some science? What about why? So the lighter disc, technically we can put more velocity on it. It's like trying to throw a bowling ball versus trying to throw a baseball. If we throw it with the same effort, the baseball's going to be moving faster, right? We have more leverage on it. It's lighter weight. The lighter weight disc is going faster out of my hand. But we're not throwing in a vacuum. We're throwing through air. So in space, if we threw a baseball and a feather, they would go the same speed. Or the feather might even go faster, I guess. That was my point. Yeah, the feather would go faster if we threw a baseball and a feather with the same amount of energy, the same force on it. But in Earth, we have air. So if we tried to throw a baseball and a feather at the same speed, the feather isn't going to go nearly as far because of wind resistance. So while these discs are very aerodynamic, the reason they stop flying at the end of their flight is because of wind resistance. So the lighter disc, like the feather, isn't going to fight through the wind as hard, so it's not going to go get that extra distance that comes from the added speed. The heavier disc is going to have more, I want to say it's inertia. I think inertia is the right term, but if it's wrong, I'm sure you'll tell me. The heavier disc is going to have more inertia, so it's going to have more power to penetrate through the air. So that is why this lighter disc didn't go any farther than this disc when thrown on the same line. So my second hypothesis was proved wrong. Now, the continuation of that thought is, why do they throw lightweight discs in massive distance competitions? And the answer is they want that understable start, but they need the fade from an overstable disc at the end. And also, because in a tailwind, they need that starting velocity. They need that starting velocity to be a lot more because they need to throw it that much faster than the wind. And then that air resistance, because it's a tailwind, isn't as much, so the tailwind is going to carry it farther. That's why they throw light discs in distance competitions. But for me to test this, I wanted to do my own sort of distance competition. I started out with the max weight Ballista Pro and I smashed it. I threw this really, really hard. It had a little bit of a tailwind here. It held the ante great and it actually kicked these branches right at the very end. I was super disappointed. This was a smash. And then the pink one didn't go very well. So I went to the Air Ballista Pro and I smashed this one. I had to start it on almost an anhyzer just because it's that much more stable. And this one had a beautiful line to it. It was on the right angle, it split the gap through the trees and faded back the exact same distance as the max weight Ballista Pro. Oh my gosh. I was so surprised. I thought the air disc on a max distance line would be 25, 30, maybe even 50 feet farther than the max weight, but it just wasn't. It's that stability. It's so much more stable than the max weight that is not going to get that extra distance. That's crazy. Crazy talk, get out of here. The last thing that I'm testing is, are lighter discs worse in the wind? So here, ironically, it wasn't very windy in Kansas. I've been waiting for a windy day to go throw these discs, and the most it's gotten was 5 to 10 miles an hour. But that's what I had, so that's what I went and threw in, and this is actually the hole right next to the warehouse, to the DC. And it plays about 350 feet, and I said, all right, to see whether the lighter weight discs are less reliable, I'm going to try and park it. I'm going to try and put it close. So I threw the max weight one, and I threw it on a hyzer flip. It flipped to flat and settled only about 15 feet past the basket. And then I went with the 167 here, and I threw it on a hyzer flip, and I did get it a little bit higher. I don't think this was necessarily the disc. This was partially my error. But I had to throw it on a little bit more hyzer, and it flipped to flat and faded out just a little bit higher. It ended up about 35 feet away from the basket. So the lighter weight disc ended up farther than the max weight disc again. Now, it's also further away from the basket, but I think that was my mistake. But in a headwind, especially, you would think that the lighter weight disc would be shorter. But I think this just reinforces and proves my point that the added velocity is canceled by added wind resistance, because the lighter weight disc was only going farther because it's less stable. Real quick, guys, I forgot to talk about this part. I did some testing with rollers. This is the max weight Ballista Pro on a roller. And neither of these went particularly far because the grass was really long. But this really demonstrates my theory about the heavier disc carrying the inertia better. I'm definitely messing up the terms. This is the 167, and it's well short, probably about 35 or 50 feet short. And I also tested some forehands. I'm throwing towards the camera here. This is the max weight, and then I'm going to throw the 168 and the air, and they all land well within 5 feet of each other. I think, especially in a tailwind, me not having the arm speed for these discs is really showing, especially on a forehand. I just wasn't able to get any of them up to speed, even the lighter weights, and so it didn't really make a difference. So conclusion time, why do pros throw max weight? I think it's because we're almost always looking for the most stable version of a disc. The most stable version is going to be the most consistent, and we can trust that one more. So that's why I throw max weight discs, because if I start with something overstable, I can trust it, I can know it, I can learn it, and as it works into that understable slot, I want a disc that I've been throwing for 6 months to fill that understable slot rather than buying something new to fill it because I'm not going to trust it as much. Other pros probably have different reasons, but also there's no reason to be embarrassed or to think that lightweight discs are only for people who are starting out. If you want to throw a less stable version of what you have, find a lighter weight disc. Or if you have a lightweight disc that fights the wind, throw it. It works just fine. Like I always say, it's a free country. Do whatever you want. But that's my findings. Have you done the similar testing? If you have similar testing, share your results in the comments. And until next time, remember, slow is smooth and smooth is far.